They laughed when the shy woman sat at the piano, but seconds later, the room fell silent as a forgotten legend came back to life. The music room was full of noise, chatter, and the light sound of piano keys being tested by nervous students. It was the audition day for the community music school's annual recital. People of all ages had come with dreams, hopes, and a little bit of fear. Some were beginners who had just started playing the piano. Others had practiced for months for this moment. Proud parents stood by, holding phones and smiling with encouragement. Teachers sat with clipboards, ready to listen, write notes, and decide who would make it into the recital. In the middle of all this, one woman sat quietly at the back of the room. She wore simple clothes, a plain sweater, worn jeans, and soft shoes. Her brown hair was tied back in a loose bun, and she had no makeup or jewelry. She didn't carry any instrument or folder. She wasn't talking to anyone. She looked around with kind eyes and a small smile, but she kept mostly to herself. Her name was Eliza. She wasn't there for herself. She had only come to sign up her 8-year-old niece, Maya, for beginner piano classes. Maya had been waiting outside with her backpack while Eliza went inside to complete the form. She had no plans to perform or even touch a piano that day. To her, it was just a normal Saturday. She liked music, of course. She always had. But that part of her life was long behind her now. The teachers didn't notice her at first. They were busy trying to organize the list of performers. Some students were too nervous to come on time. One had canceled last minute because of the flu. Another forgot their sheet music and ran home to get it. A few time slots were now empty. The organizers looked around, a bit frustrated, trying to fill the gaps. One of the teachers, a cheerful woman named Miss Harper, turned and noticed Eliza sitting alone. Thinking she might be a parent or relative of one of the students, she walked over and asked, "Are you here for the auditions?" Eliza smiled politely. "No, I'm just here to register my niece for lessons." Miss Harper looked at the list and then back at Eliza. "Well, we do have a few open slots now. If you know how to play even a little bit, we could use your help, just to keep the event moving." Eliza shook her head gently. "I haven't played in years. Not ready for something like this." But the teacher smiled kindly and said, "Oh, don't worry. It's not a real performance, just for fun. We'd love to hear you play, even just a few notes, please." A few other teachers looked up. Some students had heard the exchange and turned around curiously. Eliza felt a little awkward but didn't want to seem rude. After a small pause, she stood up and said softly, "All right, just something simple then." She walked slowly toward the grand piano placed at the center of the room. It was a shiny black Yamaha, recently tuned. The lid was open, and the bench had been adjusted by many before her. She sat down calmly, placing her hands on her lap for a moment, then looking down at the keys. Miss Harper was now joined by Mr. Brandon, another teacher, who whispered with a chuckle, "Should we give her something fun to try?" He picked up a sheet from the tabula, difficult classical piece, Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor. He handed it to Elisa with a smile, saying, "Try this. Let's see what you can do." Lisa looked at the paper, recognizing it immediately. She nodded silently and placed the sheet on the stand. Mr. Brandon stepped back, expecting a few clumsy notes or maybe a laugh. Several students in the front row giggled quietly. A teenage boy whispered to his friend, "She's going to mess up bad. That piece is insane." Eliza heard none of this. Her eyes were on the keys and her body was still. One could feel something shift in the room. She didn't seem nervous. She didn't seem unsure. She just sat with a strange, calm energy. No one in that room knew who she was. No one knew that years ago she had played this exact piece on a stage in Berlin. No one knew she'd been called a prodigy. No one knew she had studied at the most prestigious conservatory in Europe. They didn't know her name had once been on posters in concert halls. To them, she was just a quiet woman who looked too ordinary to surprise anyone. Eliza didn't think about any of that either. In her mind, she was just playing again, just like she used to when she was a teenager, alone in her room, letting the piano speak when she didn't have words. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she began. The first note echoed through the hall with deep, rich sound. Then another, Then the conversation stopped. The students who were talking suddenly froze. The laughter faded. Even the teachers leaned forward in surprise. Eliza's hands moved with grace, precision, and speed. Her fingers danced across the keys, not in a rush, but in perfect control. Each note had weight, each pause had feeling. The piece made it alive. Some of the students stared with wide eyes. One girl who had tried playing that same piece a month ago whispered, "She's better than anyone here." The teachers looked at each other, confused and shocked. Mr. Brandon's mouth hung open. Miss Harper put her hand on her heart. Eliza didn't look up. She didn't notice the crowd anymore. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She didn't even know she was being watched with such awe. For her, it was like breathing after holding her breath for years. As she reached the middle part of the piece, the dramatic, stormy section, where many stumbles she didn't falter, her hands hit the keys with strength and passion, her body swaying slightly with the music. She looked peaceful, even as the notes demanded power and emotion. No one spoke. No one moved. Phones were out now, recording silently. Even the children sat still, sensing something special was happening. When the final notes rang out, Eliza lifted her hands gently and let them rest in her lap. She looked down, took a breath, and finally looked up. The room was quiet for one full second. Then a loud burst of clapping filled the air. People stood up. Some whistled. Others cheered. Eliza looked surprised. She hadn't expected any applause. She stood up slowly and smiled. "Thank you," she said quietly, before walking back to her chair. People watched her with wide eyes. A few students asked the teachers in hushed voices, "Who is she?" But the teachers had no answers yet. Elisa simply sat down again in her seat at the back, just as quiet and kind as before. Her niece Maya came running in from outside, holding a juice box. "Are we done, Auntie?" she asked. Eliza smiled and nodded. "Yes, sweetie, let's go. Sign you up." As they walked out, the music room remained filled with whispers, wonder, and one big question: who was that woman? And why had no one ever seen her play before? The next day, the teachers at the community music school were still talking about the mysterious woman who had played the piano with such skill and emotion. None of them knew her name. No one had seen her on the school's student list yet. Her performance had left a mark in every heart that witnessed it. Miss Harper arrived early that morning, holding her coffee cup and thinking about Eliza's calm face and magical hands. Mr. Brandon, who had laughed when he gave her the Rachmaninoff piece, looked embarrassed now. He had expected her to struggle and maybe even quit halfway through. Instead, she had played the piece better than many of his own advanced students. Other teachers joined them in the staff room. Everyone was buzzing with the same thought. Who was that woman, and how had she played such a difficult piece so perfectly? Without any warm-up, without asking for help, without even blinking? Some of the teachers assumed she had been a professional. Others thought maybe she had trained in secret. A few believed it was just luck, but deep down they all knew it wasn't luck. The way she moved her fingers, the way she shaped each note, the silence she held before the final chordite wasn't something anyone could fake. It came from years of deep practice, emotion, and experience. One of the younger teachers, Miss Lily, was curious enough to go ask the receptionist if there was any record of the woman's name. The receptionist only had one form signed from the previous day, a piano registration form for an 8-year-old girl named Maya Khan. The emergency contact listed was Elisa Khan. "That's her," Lily said softly. "Liza Khan." With the name finally in their hands, the teachers went back to their desks and opened their laptops. A quick search of the name brought up a few articles, mostly old ones. Image popped up on the screen, a younger version of the same woman they had seen yesterday. Same eyes, same quiet smile. But back then, she was wearing a concert gown and standing beside a grand piano. Headlines read, Eliza Khan, the soulful prodigy from the East, played Carnegie Hall at age 17. Vanished from the stage after tragic loss. The teachers stared in silence. "She was famous," whispered Mr. Brandon, reading through the article. "She played all over Europe and America," then suddenly stopped. Miss Harper leaned in. Why didn't we know this? Why didn't she say anything? Ms. Lily replied. Maybe she didn't want to. Meanwhile, Eliza was at home, preparing breakfast for Maya. The small apartment smelled of toast and warm tea. Maya was excited, swinging her legs at the kitchen table and talking. She asked with bright eyes. Eliza smiled and patted Maya's head. No, sweetheart, you'll have your own teacher. I'll just help when you need me. But you play better than anyone, Maya insisted. They should make you the boss. Eliza laughed softly and placed eggs on Maya's plate. Maybe one day. But right now, let's focus on your lessons. Back at the music school, the teachers gathered for a quick meeting. Mr. Brandon stood up, still feeling guilty. We need to invite her back, he said, properly. We were a little dismissive yesterday. We treated her like an amateur. That wasn't right, Miss Harper agreed. Yes. We gave her the hardest piece we could find, thinking she'd fail. She played it better than anyone I've seen in years. We owe her respect. Ms. Lily had an idea. Why don't we invite her to be a guest mentor for the recital, just for a few students? Even if she says no, it's worth asking. So later that afternoon, they sent her an email with a warm message. They thanked her for sharing her talent and asked if she would be interested in working with a few students who were preparing for difficult classical pieces. They offered her full freedom, no contract, no pressure, just an open invitation. Eliza, read the message carefully. She didn't reply right away. She sat by the window, looking out at the sky, remembering how her life used to revolve around piano recitals, performances, and long hours in soundproof rooms. That life had ended the day her brother passed away in a road accident. Leaving behind little Maya, Eliza had left the stage and her music career to raise her niece. She had given everything up without regret. Music didn't feel joyful after that. It became silent, just like her grief. But yesterday, something had changed. Playing in that small room with strangers watching, she had felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. It was like the piano spoke to her again, not in words, but in a language only her soul could understand. She stared at the email, thinking of Maya. Maybe now, with Maya growing up, it was time to bring music back into her life, not on big stages or television screens, but in classrooms. With young hearts learning to find their voice through sound, she typed a simple reply. I would be happy to help. The teachers were thrilled. They immediately arranged a short meeting with her the next day. When Elisa entered the staff room, all the teachers stood up to greet her. This time, there was no playful tone, no testing attitude, no jokes. Just respect. Mr. Brandon stepped forward and said, I owe you an apology. We judged you too quickly. You were incredible. Eliza smiled gently. It's all right. Sometimes it's nice to surprise people, Miss Harper asked. Would you be willing to work with our advanced students? It's just a few of them. They need someone like you. Eliza nodded. As long as I can work part-time and be home when Maya finishes school, I'd love to. And just like that, the humble woman who had been mistaken for a nervous beginner became the most valuable mentor at the music school. Not because of fame or awards, but because of how she played, how she taught, and how she stayed kind, even when people underestimated her that week. Elisa returned to the school, this time not to sit quietly in the back, but to guide others. The students she worked with were stunned at how easily she understood their struggles. She listened more than she spoke. She never shouted, never showed off. But when she demonstrated something, the room would go quiet again, just like before. One boy named Ethan, who had almost quit piano after failing to play a piece properly, came to her feeling nervous. I'm not good enough, he said. Looking down, Eliza sat beside him at the piano bench and whispered, You're not supposed to be good yet. You're supposed to grow. He looked up confused. How? She smiled. One key at a time. With her guidance, the students began improving faster than ever. The school felt different now. Teachers walked with more care. Students practiced with more heart. There was no competition, just a quiet inspiration in the air. And though many people still didn't know her full story, one thing was clear. The humble woman with the gentle voice had returned not to be a star again, but to light stars in others. The The recital hall was almost full. Rows of chairs were lined up, facing the shining black grand piano placed in the center of the stage. Parents, students, teachers, and guests slowly filled the seats, whispering and looking through the program. Booklets. It was the night of the community music school's annual recital, and for many students, it was their first time performing in front of a crowd. Backstage, some students were warming up their fingers, others were pacing nervously, whispering to themselves, repeating their pieces in their heads. One of them, a shy girl named Amelia, sat quietly in a corner, holding her sheet music tightly in her small hands. Her name was written next to a complicated classical piece. She had worked on it for weeks, and now she was scared she would forget. Everything on stage, Eliza was standing beside her, calm and gentle. She had been helping Amelia prepare for this moment for the last few weeks. Amelia had grown close to her, not just because she was a great teacher, but because Eliza listened. She never rushed. She never made anyone feel small. Eliza knelt down next to Amelia and whispered, "Just breathe. You don't have to be perfect. Just play like it's only you and the piano." Dada nervously. Eliza smiled and squeezed her hand. Then she stood up and walked toward the side of the stage where a few teachers were gathered. Miss Harper stood, holding the recital schedule. Mr. Brandon was adjusting the microphone. Ms. Lilly was arranging the final sheets of music. They all looked at Eliza with admiration now. In just a few short weeks, she had helped transform the way students practiced and even how teachers taught. She had become a quiet force in the school, not loud, not demanding, but deeply respected. Suddenly, one of the performers didn't show up. A boy who was supposed to perform a Chopin piece had fallen sick. There was a 10-minute gap in the program. The organizers began whispering about what to do. Miss Harper looked around, then turned to Eliza. "Would you consider playing something? Just to fill the space. It doesn't have to be formal." Eliza hesitated. She hadn't played in front of a crowd since that one moment weeks ago during the audition day. That performance had been unexpected, a burst of emotion, not something she had planned. But tonight the piano was waiting, and the room was full. She looked at the audience from the side of the stage. People were talking, smiling, flipping through the program. They didn't know who she was. Most of them had come to see their children, not a former concert pianist, and that gave her peace. There were no expectations, no pressure, just music. She nodded. "All right, I'll play something short," Mr. Brandon whispered. "Do you want us to announce your name or background?" Eliza smiled. "No need. Just say there's a small surprise performance." As she stepped onto the stage, people looked up in curiosity. A few recognized her from the school, but didn't know much about her. She wasn't on the program. There was no introduction. Just a quiet woman walking toward the piano. She sat down and took a deep breath. Her fingers rested on the keys like they belonged there. The lights above her were soft and warm. The hall grew silent, and then she played. The first notes were gentle, almost like a whisper. Then came a smooth melody, rising and falling like waves. She had chosen a lesser-known romantic piece, simple, emotional, and full of soul. Her hands moved gracefully, every finger landing perfectly, not just with skill, but with feeling as she played. Something happened in the room. The noise faded. The whispers stopped. Even the youngest children sat still. There was something in the way she played. Not loud, not showy, but honest. Each note felt like a word from the heart, and everyone listened like they were being told a story. Miss Harper stood at the side of the stage, her eyes wide. She had heard Eliza play before, but tonight was different. This was not just talent. This was someone pouring their soul through the keys. Parents began leaning forward. Some were moved to tears and didn't know why. It was like the music had found a way into their emotions. Students who had been nervous earlier suddenly felt inspired. They looked at the piano not as a challenge, but as a friend. By the time Eliza reached the final notes, the hall was completely still. When she lifted her hands and looked up, there was silence for a heartbeat. Then came the applause. Loud, real, and long. The audience stood up. Some clapped with tears in their eyes. Others looked at each other, asking, "Who is she?" Eliza stood, gave a small bow, and walked off the stage. She didn't wave or smile too much. She just returned to the backstage area, where Amelia looked at her with awe. "That was beautiful," Amelia whispered. Eliza smiled. "Now it's your turn." Amelia went on stage next. She was still nervous, but something had changed in her. She remembered Eliza's advice. Just play like it's only you and the piano. So she did, and she played better than ever before. That night, student after student performed, many of them with new confidence. It was as if Eliza's performance had filled the room with something warm and strong, something that made fear smaller. After the recital, parents gathered in the hallway, talking excitedly. Some of them asked the teachers, "Who was that woman? Where did she come from? She played like a concert pianist." Mr. Brandon finally answered, "She was a concert pianist." That shocked many people. Some searched her name online. Others approached her with questions and praise. But Eliza kept her answers short. She didn't talk about her past or her fame. She thanked people kindly, but she didn't try to stand in the spotlight. Later that night, when she returned home with Maya, the little girl hugged her tightly. "You were the best," Maya said proudly. Eliza laughed. "Thank you, love. Did you enjoy the recital?" Maya nodded. "Yes, but I think you should play again. Not just here. I think the world needs to hear you." Eliza didn't say anything for a moment. She looked at Maya, at her niece's wide, hopeful eyes. That same hope she once carried when she was young. The hope that music could be more than sound, that it could heal, connect, and tell stories without words. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe the world still needed her music. But for now, she was happy here, in this small community, teaching, sharing, and slowly rediscovering the joy that had once been buried under sorrow. That night, she sat at her small upright piano at home. Long after Maya had gone to bed, she lit a candle and began to play, not for anyone else, not for an audience, but for herself. And in the soft glow of the night, with the sound of music filling the room, Eliza Kantha, woman the world had forgotten, smiled, knowing that she had never really lost her gift. She had just been waiting for the right time to share it again. After the recital night, something changed in the school. Everyone seemed more excited about music. Students came earlier for practice. Some who were shy before now sat at the piano with more confidence. Parents smiled more when dropping off their children. And the teachers had a new sense of respect and teamwork in the staff room. But the biggest change had happened because of one quiet woman, Eliza Khan. Her performance, though simple and unplanned, had left everyone surprised and inspired. In the days that followed, people couldn't stop talking about her. Some of the parents started asking questions. Who was this woman? Why wasn't she on the faculty list? Why did she never mention her past? Many had recorded her surprise performance at the recital, and those videos started spreading first in the school community, then outside. A parent shared the video on a local talent page online, writing, "This woman wasn't even on the program." But when she touched the piano, the whole room froze. Who is she? The video went viral. Within a few days, music lovers and teachers from other schools began commenting under the post. Some people recognized her face. One user wrote, "That's Eliza Khan. She used to perform in Europe, disappeared after her brother's accident." Another person added links to her old performances from years ago. There were videos of her as a teenager playing in huge halls. One showed her in Vienna, performing in front of hundreds, with an orchestra behind her. Another showed her younger self being interviewed on a music channel. The truth had come out, and now the school was receiving emails and phone calls. Reporters wanted to speak with Eliza. A famous magazine even sent a request to do a feature on her life, her rise, her disappearance, and now her return. Elisa found out about all this only when Miss Harper called her into the office and handed her a printed email. She read it slowly, her expression calm but thoughtful. "They all want to know your story," Miss Harper said kindly. "What should we tell them?" Eliza paused, then smiled gently. Nothing for now. I'm not here to be famous again. I just want to teach. Miss Harper nodded. She understood. Still, the world outside the small music school was buzzing with curiosity. Some teachers were surprised that Eliza didn't want the spotlight back. Most people would have grabbed the chance. But Eliza was different. Her joy wasn't in being known. It was in the music itself. Meanwhile, inside the school, students were beginning to understand who she really was. Word had spread that their soft-spoken mentor was once a concert pianist. Someone who had stood on stages they could only dream of. One afternoon, a group of students gathered around her after class. One of them, a boy named Thomas, said, "Miss Eliza, why didn't you tell us who you were?" Eliza laughed gently. "'Cause it doesn't matter, but it's amazing," said another girl, Rachel. "You've done everything we want to." Eliza sat down on the edge of the bench and looked at them kindly. "I've done some things, yes. But the truth is, what matters is how you feel when you play, not what others think. Not how many people clap." Students listened quietly. Continued, "I stopped playing for many years. Not because I lost the skill, but because I lost the feeling. When my brother passed away, I couldn't hear the music inside me anymore. It was like silence took over. I didn't know what to say. The room felt heavy and quiet." Eliza looked out the window and said softly, "But something changed when I walked into this school. I saw students like you trying, hoping, learning. I saw teachers who cared. I saw my niece fall in love with music." And slowly, that silence began to fade. She looked back at them. "So you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be famous. You just need to love the sound your hands make on the keys." The students smiled, their respect for her deepening. That evening, Eliza walked home with Maya, who now proudly told everyone at school that her aunt was a real piano legend. As they passed by a bookstore, Maya stopped in front of the window where music books were displayed. "Auntie, look. They have the book with your picture." Eliza looked and saw an old photo of herself on the cover of a biography about young musical talents. It was strange, like seeing a different version of herself from a faraway time. Maya looked up at her. "Does it make you sad?" Eliza shook her head. "No, not anymore. It just feels like a chapter that's closed, but I'm writing a new one now." A few days later, a group of music students from a nearby college visited the school. They had heard about Eliza and wanted to attend a workshop. The school invited Eliza to speak to them. She was hesitant at first, but agreed. She stood at the front of the classroom, about 30 young adults watching her carefully. Most of them had read about her online. Some had even watched her old concert videos over and over. But when she spoke, she didn't talk about awards or stages. She said, "When I was your age, I thought success meant performing in the biggest halls. But when I finally got there, I felt empty. Because I had forgotten why I started playing in the first place." She paused and continued, "Music is not about showing off. It's not about being the best. It's about feeling something deeply and letting others feel it through you." Room was quiet. One student raised his hand and asked, "If you could go back, would you do anything differently?" Eliza smiled a little sadly. "I would spend more time listening, not just to the piano, but to people, to life. I used to chase perfection. But now I know real music comes from imperfection, from being human." After the session, many students came up to thank her. One of them said, "You made me want to start over, to stop pretending and start feeling." Eliza nodded. "Then I've done my part." As the weeks passed, Eliza's influence only grew, but she still stayed out of the spotlight. She refused interviews. She turned down offers to perform at public events. Instead, she focused on teaching, guiding, and encouraging. She even started a small evening class for adults who had once dreamed of playing piano, but never got the chance. One man in his 50s cried the first time he played a full song. A young mother came after work every Thursday just to play for 15 minutes and feel peaceful to Eliza. Those moments were more important than the applause of a big crowd. One morning, as she entered the school, she found a bouquet of flowers and a note on the front desk. The note read, "Thank you for reminding us what music is really about, from your students, young and old." Eliza held the note for a long moment, her eyes soft. That afternoon, while Maya practiced at home, Eliza sat at her own piano, thinking. Her heart was lighter now. Her fingers played without fear, without pressure. She realized something powerful. She hadn't truly disappeared all those years ago. She had only been waiting to return, not with noise and fame, but with quiet strength. And now that she was back, she wasn't here to take the stage. She was here to lift others up onto it. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest performance of all. The small music school, once quiet and modest, had now become a place where something special was happening every day. The students practiced with more heart, the teachers spoke with more patience, and the building felt warm, alive like it, was filled with real purpose. All this had begun with the arrival of one woman who never asked for attention, never showed off, and never raised her voice. Eliza Khan had changed everything without even trying to. She continued to teach her students, with the same calm presence. Whether they were beginners who didn't know where middle C was, or advanced players struggling with complex pieces, Eliza gave them all the same attention. She taught them not only how to play the notes, but how to feel them. That music wasn't just sound, it was a reflection of the soul. But slowly, the truth about her past spread even more. It was no longer just whispers in the hallway. Now her name was being talked about outside the city, in other schools, and music forums, and even among retired musicians who remembered her as the young prodigy who once amazed Europe. People began calling the school, asking if she gave private lessons. Others wanted her to come speak at conferences or judge competitions. Eliza gently turned down most of the offers. She said she was content teaching here, where the joy of music was still pure. She didn't want the pressure, the lights, the interviews. But something inside her was beginning to shift. Not because she wanted to return to fame, but because she wanted to use her gift in a bigger way, for others. One evening, she sat on the floor of her apartment with her niece Maya, who was now growing into a curious and bright young pianist. Maya asked a question that made Eliza pause. "Auntie, when I grow up, will I play on a big stage like you did?" Eliza smiled and brushed Maya's hair back gently. "If you want to, but you don't have to. The big stage isn't the only place." "Music lives," Maya tilted her head. "Then where else does it live?" Eliza thought for a moment. "It lives here," she said, pointing to Maya's heart, and here, pointing to her fingers. "And when you play with love, it lives in the people listening to?" Maya was quiet for a moment, then said, "Then I want to play in a way that makes people feel something, like you do." That sentence stayed with Eliza long after Maya had gone to bed. She sat by the window that night, watching the city lights, and thinking. She thought about the girl she once was, driven, talented, always running toward the next competition, the next concert. She remembered how people clapped loudly, how lights flashed, how cameras followed her. But then she remembered how lonely it felt backstage, how empty the hotel rooms were, how her brother's laughter had been the only sound that truly comforted her. She also remembered the silence that followed his death. Years of not playing, not listening, just surviving. And now, somehow her music had returned, not loud, not flashy, but stronger than ever. She made a quiet decision that night. A week later, the school announced something unusual. They would host a free community concert open to everyone, young and old, students and non-students. No tickets, no dress codes, no rules. The goal was simple, to bring people together through music. Eliza helped plan the entire event, but she didn't announce her own role. She invited her students to perform, even some shy adults who'd only started learning recently. She encouraged children to play their small pieces without fear of mistakes. She told each one, there is no wrong note, only a chance to find the next one. The concert night arrived and the school hall was full of life. People came from nearby towns, some who had seen her videos online, others who had once watched her perform as a teenager. Still, Elisa didn't let her name be printed anywhere on the program. She simply wanted the night to belong to everyone. Concert began with a cheerful performance by a 6-year-old who barely reached the piano bench. The crowd laughed and clapped kindly. Then came a teenage girl who had once struggled with stage fright, but now played a soft lullaby with steady hands. A group of adults played a duet together, smiling and looking at each other for support. Every performance, no matter how small or big, was met with warm applause. Then, near the end, Miss Harper walked onto the stage and took the microphone. She looked at the audience and said, "Tonight has been special, not because of who played, but because of how they played. With heart, with courage, and there's someone who has reminded us all what music really means. Many of you know her by now. Tonight, we want to celebrate her not as a famous pianist, not as someone from the past, but as the heart of this school." She turned toward the side of the stage. "Elisa, will you play for us?" The crowd broke into applause, cheering her name. Elisa stepped forward slowly. She was wearing a simple black dress and soft shoes. Her face showed calmness, not surprise. She had known this would happen, but she had waited until the last moment to decide. She sat down at the piano. The room went silent again, just like that day during the first audition. This time, she didn't play a dramatic classical piece or a technical masterpiece. Instead, she played something original, something she had written recently. A quiet melody, full of warmth, memory, and healing. As the first notes floated through the air, the audience felt it. Not just heard it, but felt it. It was the sound of someone who had lost and returned, someone who had broken and healed, someone who had once fallen silent and found her voice again. Children in the front row stared with wide eyes. Elderly guests closed their eyes, moved by something they couldn't explain. Aya sat with her hands pressed together, watching her aunt play with all the grace and honesty she admired. When the final note faded, no one moved. The silence lasted a little longer. This time then came the applause. Not loud or wild, but full of respect, full of understanding. It was not applause for fame. It was applause for truth. Eliza stood, bowed lightly, and stepped back. After the concert, people came up to her one by one, not to ask for autographs, but to say thank you. One man said, "I haven't felt this peaceful in years." A woman said, "I used to play before my hands grew stiff. Tonight, you reminded me of who I used to be." An old student from her past appeared too. He had once studied with her many years ago, before she vanished from the music world. He hugged her gently and said, "You haven't changed. You still play like you're telling a story." Eliza smiled. The stories are different now, but the voice is the same. That night, as she walked home with Maya beside her, the stars above seemed brighter. Maya looked up at her and said, "Did you see how happy everyone was?" Eliza nodded. "Yes, that's the magic of music. It connects us, Savan, when we have nothing else in common." Maya squeezed her hand. "Will you keep playing forever?" Eliza looked ahead, the cool night breeze brushing against her cheeks. "As long as there's someone who needs to hear it." With that, Eliza, once a name on posters, now a quiet legend in a small town, continued to live her life. Not in the spotlight, but in the soft glow of shared music, gentle lessons, and the silent applause of hearts touched by her gift. Because in the end, her greatest performance wasn't on a stage, it was in how she made others believe that they, too, had music inside them.